Good morning and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, and John Gibson. We're waiting for Supermac. John's quite rightly pointed out before we came on air that Supermac always used to arrive late in the box. So that's presumably why he's arrived late in the show today, John.
He'll get there eventually, mate. He always does.
He does, mate. He does. So how have you been, John? How are you coping? Is everything okay your end?
I'm good. End of the longest season in my lifetime today. And then before we've turned around twice, we're into the new one.
That's right. I mean, 12th of September is the date that's been set, John. Is that too quick? Is that too quick?
Well, it's too quick for the takeover, Stephen. I mean, in a way, it is too quick. But quite frankly, that's sort of later than season normally is. And I think the sooner we get on with it, perhaps, the better. The frightening part is that it's far, far too quick for Newcastle United in particular because of our unique set of circumstances, Steve.
Yeah, 100%. The takeover situation is really, really, really starting to get on people's nerves now and agitate people. And you know, there doesn't seem to be an answer as to why it hasn't gone ahead. You either get a yes or a no. It's as simple as that. But we just seem to be dragging on, John, and it does look as if it's going to drag into the pre-season.
Well, I mean, it's absolutely frightening, the whole thing, Steve. As I was working out, it's 4 months since the tests began. It's 3 weeks since Richard Masters told us that they were very, very close to making a statement. Today is the last day of this season. The transfer window is about to open, and in 7 weeks' time, as we've said, on September the 12th, we're into a new season. And there's nothing changed at Newcastle United. 4 months ago, when all this started, everyone's tip-off and said in the paper was that there will be an answer shortly, there's no red flags, and we're very optimistic. 4 months later, there'll be an answer shortly. There's no red flags, and we're very optimistic. I mean, from my point of view, I know it isn't simple, Steve, in as much as this piracy thing, etc., has coloured the water. But if the Premier League want an end to this, and there's got to be an end at some time, and they're 100% committed to try to get an end product, and if the Saudis want to take over Newcastle, and they unquestionably do, surely the two bodies can get together and come up with an answer pretty quick. Because between the pair of them, they're killing Geordie hope, Geordie aspirations, and something that excited Geordie people 4 months ago is absolutely depressing them and frustrating them and annoying them right now. I mean, there's a simple line, cut down to the bottom line. The Premier League's got to look the Saudis in the eye and say, are you going to sort out this piracy? If the answer is yes, let me see within a fortnight a concrete move to do that. And either that happens and the takeover then goes ahead, or it doesn't happen. The longer the Premier League leave the thing, the more the people that are opposed to this takeover, the moralists are on the ground of the piracy or human rights, or just on the grounds that we don't want those Geordie so-and-sos being a force in football next season, you're giving them more ammunition and making it more difficult to say yes in the end. You've got to get a hold of the situation, because in 7 weeks' time, the new season starts. So the odds at this moment are that we start the new season with Mike Ashley in charge and everything the way it has been. Goodness knows what we do in that 7 weeks regarding the quality of the signings and the amount of money splashed in the transfer market, because make no mistake, this hasn't been a great season. That is an absolute myth. We have stayed up, for which we're eternally grateful. We cannot call this a great season when we've scored 37 goals in 37 games. which is the worst we've done in the Premier League apart from one single season. And yet we're told that this has been a terrific season. No, it hasn't. An awful lot of work to be done in an awful short space of time. We don't even know who's driving the horses.
No, you're right, 100%, John. I mean, I think you're on the money when you talk about this piracy issue and the television situation. It gives us that impression that it's something to do with that, and that is what's holding the deal up. And the deal is done with Ashley. We've mentioned it numerous times on this show before when we've spoken that the keys have been put through the letterbox and he's walked off. He just wants his money. Yeah. But it'll be annoying Ashley that this is dragging on. But obviously there is something which is a major disagreement between both sides, which needs to be ironed out, and is going to need some major talks or surgery or whatever it is, or somebody backing down to get the deal done. That's where we're at, and it's just it's frustrating because we don't know what it is, the fans don't know what it is, and we're in a position where we're in limbo. And Steve Bruce's press conference, I'm sure you've read through it or seen the reports from the weekend, and it was hardly exciting to hear Steve Bruce say that he saved money in January to spend in the summer, but now he was going to have to revisit the budget because season tickets weren't being paid for, and he was going to have to revisit the budget with the powers that be, and that he was hoping to meet Mike Ashley. It doesn't instill you with confidence, does it, going into a new season at the start of September?
No, it doesn't. And for me, Steve, the great work of any football club is done in the summer. What you sow in the summer, you reap during the season. And if they don't do the right work this summer, then we'll go into an awesome season, and we don't want to spend all next season fighting against relegation and then saying, oh, hurrah, at the end of it, we've escaped relegation, whoever owns the club, or worst scenario, we haven't escaped relegation. We cannot stand another season like that. We don't deserve another season like that. We look upwards, I've said time and time again, and see clubs with utmost respect that we think were potentially bigger than them, i.e. Sheffield United, Wolves, Burnley. We see them sitting above us, Southampton going away now, and we are looking at their exhaust pipe fumes coming out at us, and it is an absolute nonsense, and enough's enough. We've got to get on and have an even chance next season. You can't live without oxygen and you can't live without hope. And at the moment, we are having to do both.
Yeah, lots of people commenting already on the takeover. But as I say, nobody really knows what's happening. Peter Robson, really looking forward to some fantastic attacking football today. Unfortunately, he says it will all be coming from Liverpool. I think he's right. We'll come on to the game a little bit later. Steve Bruce's press conference for me was just depressing. To hear that we really are going to be struggling in the transfer window. We're not going to be bringing in the big names we were hoping that a takeover would help us with. We're going to be bringing in loan players, and we're going to be bringing in, bargain buys. And I think the other thing, John, that hit me when he was interviewed, midweek was that he also said, centre forwards. Yeah, somebody said you'd be looking to bring in a striker, and he was going, well, it really just depends, So to hear that a striker might not be his first port of call is a bit concerning, especially with the injuries we've now got to Shaw and Lascelles. Then it could be long term. They might miss pre-season. They might not be available for the start of the season. Is his mind going elsewhere? Is he thinking of bringing in another centre half? And is that going to use all the budget? Are we going to be stuck with Joe Linton up front next season?
And I think one of the things that we forget about, Steve, because quite rightly, both barrels are aimed at the owner by Newcastle United fans. Quite rightly, the next person that is a target is always the manager or the head coach, whoever that is. But we rely so much these days on player recruitment, which has been very, very poor at Newcastle. The old days when the manager had that wonderful Midas touch and signed quality players, i.e. Joe Harvey, i.e. Kevin Keegan, have well gone now. We are now in the business of having to rely on a scouting system to produce. And if we are going to solve the centre forward problem by throwing 40 million at somebody like Joe Linton, who, unless he scores today, is going to end up with 2 league goals for the whole season. Danny Murphy this morning rated Joe Linton the worst signing in the Premier League this season. And he incidentally named one of 2 as the best signing, being San Maximin, which is true. But for every San Maximin we've had the likes of Joe Linton and Mutu and Christian Atsu, who have been an absolute waste of money. So do we get 1 right out of 3, 1 right out of 4? And are we going to be reduced, as you've just said, to signing this summer either players on loan or alleged bargains that are cheap, like taking a risk on Andy Carroll on his fitness, etc., etc. And no fault of Carroll, we knew his injury record, but he's come, and unless he scores today, he'll not have scored in the whole of the season for us. And he's an orthodox number 9, and he's got a new contract for next season.
It's crazy. Paul Unwin says they have to give an answer, surely, otherwise we could do something if we miss out in the transfer market. I mean, it's putting the club on the back foot, isn't it, massively for next season, John?
Yeah, well, Ashley has put us on the back foot in the past in the transfer market because he's been very, very reluctant. We are now being put on the back foot by the Premier League. And of course, Ashley doesn't care. It's amazing that Ashley's in the same bed as the fans, considering they dislike each other so much, because Ashley's now in our camp, isn't he? Desperate for totally different reasons, desperate for the deal to go through, so he gets 300 million. We are desperate for it to go through, so we'll get rid of him. Steve Bruce is in the same camp, desperate for it to go through because he wants to know his future. The only thing we don't know in all this is what the Premier League are going to do about it. And we could be worse off than the traditional struggling clubs in the summer, who are the clubs that's won promotion, who are trying to get a good enough squad to compete in the Premier League. We are going to be behind them this summer if we're not careful.
Yeah, 100%. Graham Dougal says the Premier League need to decide one way or another. I just want my club back. Although I do worry what kind of club we'll have without Takeover. That's a massive concern amongst a lot of fans. I mean, can you see a way forward if the Takeover doesn't go through and we have to stick with Mike Ashley and Steve Bruce, John?
Well, it's absolutely frightening. If that happened to be the case for the whole of next season, no, I wouldn't see a way forward under Ashley under any circumstances whatsoever. I think the difference with Ashley this time, Steve, is that he is very anxious to sell the club, when the past he hasn't been. But having said that, the process, starting from scratch again, is so long while he agrees a deal with the new prospective owners, when they prove that they've got the money and it's fanciful, and then it goes back to the Premier League again. And quite frankly, all this business of the American hovering in the background, I don't give much credence to at all. I don't think it's got any more strength than a couple of other deals that we heard about before the Saudis come out the woodwork, the ones that never actually got round to happening. So it is frightening, and it would take an awful long time. And the trouble is, if we only get it solved by, say, Christmas, if this deal collapses, or afterwards, we could be relegated at the end of next season before we start again. And we can't rely on coming up in one season like we did the last twice under Chris Hughton and Benitez, because it doesn't always happen like that. It is a huge, huge concern at the moment. Why? Because the situation isn't any clearer now than it was 4 months ago. We don't appear publicly, at least, to be one step further forward than we were then.
No, we don't. We've had a message from Malcolm. He's struggling. He says he hasn't got the link for the show. And, he's having email issues. So hopefully the link gets through to him. I've sent it about 5 times. So if we do get joined by Malcolm, I will add him to the conversation. Hopefully he'll get his issues sorted for after the match. We always have him on after the game. Alan White says, can the Premier League block the takeover over piracy that's not in the owner's test? And Amanda Staveley and the Reuben brothers don't have anything to do with that. Yeah, I actually got stopped on my morning walk along the quayside today, John, by somebody who asked exactly the same question. And that is, should the hold-up be with the Saudis and PIF, then did I think that Amanda Staveley and the Reubens would contemplate, simply going ahead and buying the club themselves? And I'm sure there's ways and means of, money being used, by those other people, to essentially help Amanda and Reuben. Hi, Malcolm. Good morning.
Hello, guys. Sorry I'm a bit late.
Don't worry, mate. Don't worry. Yeah, so...
Good gracious, who's that mask? Morning, mate.
All right, John. How are you?
The question...
We're good, mate. All the better for seeing you.
The question we're dealing with essentially here is, can the Premier League block the takeover over piracy that's not in the owner's test? And Amanda Staveley and the Reuben brothers don't have anything to do with that. So essentially, John, and then I'll come to you, Malcolm, is, a lot of people feeling that if the problem is PIF and the issue with the piracy, that potentially, Amanda and the Reuben brothers, the Reuben brothers could buy the club on their own. Do you think that would be something that would be contemplated? The fact that they've gone down this, route, they've put 17 million in Ashley's bank account.
It's a very interesting point, Steve, because we are looking for small morsels to give us a little bit of hope. 2 things, I think, and I know you think this yourself, Steve, is that if this gets blocked without question, unless the Saudis lose interest, and I don't see them doing that, they will go to court over this. They will not just walk away with the tail between the legs. So we haven't heard the end of it. It's obvious that Amanda is not in a position to buy the club on her own, because she could have done that before now. She has looked, she determined to get United, but always in partnership, where she financially was the minor partner in each. She tried to put 3 consortiums together, didn't she? I would think the Reuben brothers would do something like that if the Saudis are unacceptable, and it's only over the piracy thing that, and if you want, human rights would also go out the window with the piracy thing if the Saudis weren't part of the equation. I would like to think the Reubens would go ahead themselves, or know of somebody that could come in and perhaps do a 40-40 with them, or a 45-45, leaving Amanda to take over the other bit, because that might short circuit the weight, then having to start all over again and fish round with all sorts of nondescript people sort of throwing their hat in the ring for the publicity, but then not having the dough. We need a breakthrough big time.
Yeah, Malcolm, it's something which a lot of people are hoping would come true. Do you think Amanda and the Reubens would contemplate going in alone if the issue was simply PIF and Saudi and the piracy?
One of the things that's really surprised me in all of this is that the Reuben brothers could easily afford to do this deal on their own. So why are they only accepting a 10% share? That's the thing that's got me absolutely puzzled. Yes, I believe that they could do the deal on their own. But the fact that they were prepared to accept 10%, I'm not convinced that they would be happy to go it alone, as it were. But I still cannot, for the life of me, see on what grounds the Premier League can stop this takeover from happening as it stands, for the simple reason that there have been too many precedents. So are they just picking on Newcastle United? Are they picking on Saudi Arabia? Too much has already gone gone through over recent years for anybody to say no to this.
Yeah. Edward asks, who would we rather see relegated today? Villa, who gloated at us, Bournemouth, who we might get some cheap players off, or Watford, who, if they go down, could scrap a Matty Longstaff going. Gibbo, who was your favourite to go down today?
That's a great question, actually. My normal reaction would be Aston Villa, because they absolutely adore us so much. It would be lovely to put it up them. That would be my natural reaction. Watford probably deserve it for the way they treat managers, which is absolutely horrendous. Probably the ones that least deserve it are Bournemouth, who, with crowds of 11,000, have managed to survive for 5-6 years in the Premier League under a very, very good manager. If I was convinced that we would get the best couple of Bournemouth players, then they could go down. But if it was off an even mark, Aston Villa will do for me.
Malcolm, have you got a preference?
I think just the way that Watford have treated Nigel Pearson, who got them off the bottom of the table, who got them out of the bottom three, albeit only by one position, but it appeared under his guidance that they were going to be safe, and then he was sacked with 2 games to go. I think it was the most ridiculous, stupid decision that I've seen in football for a very long time, and I've seen some stupid things happen, believe me. So I would like to see Watford go down. I wouldn't like to, but if the choice is mine, then I would say Watford, just purely for a really stupid decision.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd say Watford.
I mean, Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth are the ones under normal circumstances that most people would like to see avoid going down. If two's got to go down with Norwich, if it happens to be Villa and Watford, there wouldn't be a lot of crocodile tears, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would agree with you, John. Bournemouth, I think they've been a phenomenon in the Premiership for the last couple of years. They've done absolutely brilliantly, and certainly they don't deserve to go down. Yeah, I would like to see them stay, that's for sure.
Yeah. Jason Carter says Steve Bruce's most successful transfer is bacon from the packet to the frying pan. A lot of people trying to make predictions, but we'll come to that later. Peter Robson says in 7 weeks we will have lost ASM and Miggy and Dubravka if the Premier League don't make the right decision now. Yeah, Malcolm, that's a big concern among supporters that, you know, now that we are looking at potentially going through this summer period, still trying to sort a takeover out, that with the transfer window being open from tomorrow and being open through until the season kicks off, so I think it's the 5th of October now, so it'll actually be open for those first few weeks of the new season, that if a big offer comes in for Dubravka, if a big offer comes in for St. Maximin, or if a big offer comes in for Almiron, then Mike Ashley might be, you know, in that, you know, he's
I see the point.
He's going to take the money. What do you think?
I would think that that right now the Ashley people running the club, they're sort of keeping things warm with the takeover. I'm sure the takeover is going to happen, and it will all happen within the next week or so. And so I personally can't see the Ashley people making any bold moves in any way in the transfer market, either buying or selling. So Maximin, he's on a long contract. Surely the Saudis, they would be having a little bit of a say in the background as to who stays, who goes.
Yeah. What do you think, John? Can you see one of the big names leaving in the summer?
Well, I mean, that is always your worry. In the Chronicle, the Saturday Chronicle, the guy who just named the three players that could go, Dubrovka, Maximum, and Miggy, I said were three of the four players that have increased their stature at Newcastle United this season, and the rest have most certainly not. I mean, forget it. If those three left and we're still in the same situation at the start of the season with Mike Ashley on the club, Steve Bushman, put up the shutters, throw the keys away, get in the car, or leave, because you cannot afford those to go. I would hope they wouldn't. I mean, certainly it wouldn't make equal sense to cash in on Maximum yet, because he is a young man that's going to get even better, and so his transfer fee is going to get better. But we have got to stop being a selling club. The way that we've got to stop being grateful for just staying up. We've got to stop being a selling club, which has gone on way before Ashley, when we sold Waddle Beardsley and Gascoigne in an 18-month spell, and when we sold, all right, we sold Andy 6 million, but that worked the treat because 36 million was huge, and he got a pile of injuries, never scored 10 goals in the season after that. But we're doing that. We really have to stop doing that. And what signal would that send out to Newcastle United fans and to any prospective buyer if you've just got rid of three of your jewels when you hardly any? Can't afford to do that. But naturally, fans will be worried. Of course, they'll be worried, because 2 months ago, they were wondering if we're going to be the next Manchester City. Now they're worried that we're going to sell the only few diamonds we've got in the shop window.
Yeah, good points. There's some lots of points coming in. Jason Carter says our £40 million signing made football news yesterday, not for his ability on the field, but because he's got a new hairdo. It says it all, really. Dan Milne says, really, once this season is over, the Premier League have no more excuses to hold up the deal. They're killing our club by holding this up. Matty Davis says it would be an insult to the club's history if Joe Linton is given the number 9 shirt next season, which I've got to say I agree with. Gothmog's Pajama says, I don't believe the fee for Joe was 40 million. The club never stated that the fee, it was undisclosed. I think the club let people think it was 40 million to take the pressure off when Rafa left. Maybe 40 million includes the wages. I'm not sure about that, John. I believe that it was 40 million. I think there was a lot of expenses, John, in that fee, but I do believe it was 40 million.
There was a lot of add-ons.
Yeah.
But I mean, isn't it hard to believe, and I don't want to start persecuting the guy as a guy, but isn't it hard to believe? This is what worries me. What worries me is the Newcastle United scouting system. Who was it that scouted Joe Linton, considered him worth 40 million, considered him good enough to have to be more than happy to get Benitez out the way because he was a stumbling block to the deal, and then saw Joe Linton as a Newcastle United number 9 with all the tradition that has? If you looked alone at his goal scoring record without going to see him play, if you look at his goal scoring record where he doesn't score 10 league goals in any season, what on earth makes you think he's a Newcastle United number 9 in a league that's 3 times as good as any league Joe Linton's been in the past? I cannot understand the reasoning behind that deal. I can see wanting to go for Miggy with his pace and his entry, even when he wasn't scoring when he first come. You could see what the attraction was. You certainly know what the attraction is with Maximum. But what was the attraction with Joe Linton when, if you just look at the record books alone, Malcolm, they tell you, don't do it. He is not a number 9 and he doesn't score enough goals. And you bring him to play in the Premier League, twice as good as what he's been doing. Madness.
John, I couldn't agree more with you. I have searched and searched to find any evidence for Newcastle to have an interest in Joe Linton and want to buy him. And from what I understand, that the deal was on for January of last year, and it was put in that month to Rafa Benitez, and he said no. And this was the beginning of the parting of the ways for Rafa, and so Joe Linton came. Now, you mentioned, John, that with the fee, there was an awful lot of add-ons and what have you, and I think there was a lot of people making money out of this. That's the kind of impression that it's left me with, and I cannot see how anybody could value Joe Linton at 40 million when Rafa Benitez said he's not worth half that.
No, definitely not. Steve Bennett says with nothing. Right. Steve Bennett says with nothing to play for, if Carroll is fit or fit-ish, would you start him against his old club and try to get 60 minutes out of him? Would you start Andy Carroll today, Malcolm?
Yeah, why not? Absolutely. Yeah, I will play him up front and partnered by the little fella. What has concerned me is that Joe Linton, who has really struggled to score, really struggled to even get on the end of any chances. And I think he's had probably 4 chances in all of these games that he's played this season. What concerns me is, with him so out of form, why has he constantly been played? It can't do his confidence any good. It can't be doing his morale any good. And also, he's got to live in the dressing room and on the pitch with his teammates, and they must look at the team sheet and say, oh, no, he's in again. That means we're going to struggle for goals. That means we're going to struggle to get a result out of the match. And I just find it a bit of... Go on, John. Sorry.
Well, the interesting thing, Malcolm and Steve, that today, when we play Liverpool, if Shelby doesn't score, he will be top scorer unless Almir in the Premier League, not overall, in the Premier League, he will be top scorer with 6 unless he adds to it today, unless Almiron scores a hat-trick because he's on 4 and a hat-trick against Liverpool. I remember somebody doing that. I don't know who it was. Malcolm will tell us later. But I remember somebody scoring a hat-trick against Liverpool. But unless Almiron does that, our top scorer in the Premier League this season will be Shelby with 6, which will be the smallest total for something like 30 years, I think, since the 80s or the 90s. And that's phenomenal. And as I said in the early part, before Malcolm on screen, we've got 37 league goals in 37 games. So this is not a successful season. They are very mediocre figures. And doesn't it all tell us what's got to be put right? But of course, at the end of last season, we'll worry about the summer, what happens in the transfer market. At the end of last season, were 2 top goal scorers who at least both made double figures, Rondon and Perez, were got rid of, and we replaced them with Shelby, who is often plays on the toes of the centre half, being our top Premier League goal scorer with 6 goals. Do we need to put something right there? Massive.
Yeah, good
absolutely. Sorry, Steve, but yes, it has to be put right, because when you think that for the first half of the season, 2 centre halves were the leading scorers, and it's others have only sort of come onto the scene in the second half of the season. That first half of the season, if a centre half didn't score, then Newcastle were 0, and so yes, that
Yeah.
As much as anything, scoring goals is a mental thing, and you know, and I look at Joe Linton. He hasn't got the mentality for it. He hasn't got the confidence for it, and so it makes it all so difficult for the rest of the team all around the pitch, because if they've got a centre forward who hasn't got a clue about sticking it in the net, then other people have got to come out of their position and get into his to get the ball in the net, and it just creates turmoil that way. And I go back to when Alex Stock was my manager at Luton just before I joined Newcastle. He would give every person in the team a target of goals to hit, and that would all add up to enough goals to get promoted. And it's as if a lot of people in football, they're frightened to talk about promotion. And I have a feeling that they're frightened to give people targets these days. You know what? And Joe Linton, he must think, because he's been all of the time, he's been constantly selected. Therefore, he must think, oh, well, it's all right what I'm doing. You know, and it's not all
Malcolm,
right.
If everybody was given targets if everybody had been given targets season, Malcolm, at Newcastle in the Premier League, in terms of goals, I think only one guy would have probably got to the target he was given, which is Shelby. If you'd asked Shelby to score 6 goals before the season started, you would probably, well, that'll take a little bit of doing. But everybody else has, I mean, you take the forwards, the amount of goals Mutu and Gale over a full season, Carroll, Joe Linton, and you say it's a mental thing. Well, scoring goals, and you know better than anybody. I'm smiling to myself, mental thing, because you've got to be mental to score goals. You've got to be able to put your head where it shouldn't be, amongst flying boots, to finish. And my thing, Malcolm, when I've been watching Joe Linton, it has never been hungry enough to put himself at risk in the penalty area to build the 6-yard box, to get on the end of things where there's flying boots, where there's flick knives in the alley, etc., etc. That's how Shearer scored his goals. That's how you scored your goals. And I don't see that as a natural part of Joe Linton's game, which makes you think he probably sees himself as a left-sided player, playing almost as a left winger that doesn't have to get into the box.
John, I can't argue with anything that you've said there. But surely Steve Bruce, you know, we keep talking about Joe Linton and what have you, but Steve Bruce, as the manager, he's got to take the responsibility for this at the end of the day. And he should be picking a side where it gives people every chance of getting on the end of something in the box and scoring. Alex Stock at Luton, he gave us all targets. How would Joe Linton play if he was told, you have to score 20 goals over a season? I think his whole mindset would alter and change, and that he would view the game quite differently. I bet nobody has demanded goals from him, and there is no reason why you can't demand, say, 3 or 4 goals off each of your fullbacks, 3 or 4 goals off each of your centre halves, and put it in their heads. Come on, we've got to get on the end of every chance. Joe Linton has twice this season received the ball, knocked it off, turned, sprinted into the box, and he's finished up with 2 goals from those times. He hasn't done it at any other time. He hasn't knocked the ball off, turned, sprinted towards the goal. So has he not learned anything from the 2 goals that he did score and how those goals came about, how he got himself into the box? So I don't think people are actually thinking goals. Possibly Dwight Gale is the only one who actually really concerns himself about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not. I saw more joy from centre halves sticking the ball in the net than I've seen from those who are supposed to be scoring the goals.
Yeah. B. Taylor says, genuine question, lads. Would Ashley be allowed to sell major club assets with a takeover going through? So it's just following up on what we were talking about before about maximum, etc. I'm not sure, John. What's the story on that? With the deal agreed, I presume it's the club still has to operate, doesn't it?
Well, no. It would be a very stupid thing to do. With a deal agreed, it would be a very stupid thing to do to sell your assets. But legally, until pen is put to paper and £300 million is transferred from one bank account into Ashley's bank account, he can do what he likes, which includes giving a new contract to Manquillo, giving a new contract to Cat, making all the signings this summer, whether the signings new owners would want or not. Until the day new owner is given the keys and he puts it in the lock in the front door and walks through, legally, Ashley can do anything he wants. Where the gentleman is absolutely right is it would be a very, very, very stupid thing to do to antagonize your prospective buyers by selling your top people. But if you remember, several weeks ago, there was a request from the prospective new owners to be able to talk direct to Steve Bruce, and Ashley blocked that and said, you can't do that until the club is yours. Now, I wouldn't be naive enough to think for one moment that if contact was necessary between prospective owners and people within the club, it can easily happen through the back door. But there is no reason why, because Ashley could turn around and sell, heaven forbid, maximum for 30 million next week and say, well, at this given moment, there's no indication Newcastle will have a new owner. I might be in charge of the club for all of next season. Can you imagine that happening?
But John, if the owner, the current owner, if he were to do that, let's say he sells St. Maximin, gets in about, I don't know, 40 million or whatever, then the deal has changed. The deal has completely changed. And the prospective purchasers would have every right to say, you've devalued the club, and therefore we will only pay a lot less. So it's not in Ashley's interest to disturb things.
Of course it isn't.
Yeah, you're right.
But that's what I was saying. It would be a very, very stupid thing to do, a very stupid thing to do. Yeah. But we know in the back advocating, and I don't think for 1 second, Malcolm and Steve, I don't think for 1 second it'll happen. But where we always get our fear from, we know that Ashley's done jerk reactions and complete U-turns throughout the last 13 years on a situation and try to justify it in whatever way he wishes. And, you know, he could get irritated enough by this hold-up, and evidently is getting hugely irritated, but then so are we, of course. No, I don't think he would do it, but the question is, could he do it? The question was, could he do it? Could he legally do it? And unfortunately, the answer is legally, yes, he could. But it would be a very stupid thing to do. You know, if you're selling your house tomorrow morning and you knock down the garage on the side of the house, it would be rather a stupid thing to do, wouldn't it? So I don't think he would do it. Risk's always there. And Newcastle fans are at the stage where we're saying, what on earth is going on here? And what could be more stupid? You know, the big worry is whether we sell our best players, supposing we keep them as we should and as we believe we will, unless you get another 4 as good as them through the door, we are still in the same position next season as we are this season. 3 lads on to make this season a good season and take us above halfway. They need help. And my concern is what quality of help will they get in the summer until the takeover has actually been completed, if it ever gets completed.
Yeah, some great points. We've got a lot coming in. Alan asked me if I could shed any light on why St James's Park had been fenced off this week and the training ground too. Yes, Lee Marshall from the club did answer that question on Twitter. Just said it was all to do with the security for certain games, Liverpool game being one of them. So that was the answer to that. There has been a lot of pictures posted of the training ground this week, and there seems to be a complete lack of a certain sports shop signage. A lot of people taking positives from that. The answer about that is I don't know. Mike Ashley has had a habit in the past of taking it down to be cleaned and then putting it back up, which of course creates a big wave of excitement. And then unfortunately, it just means everyone's talking about his sports brand for days on end on social media, which is clever. Davey Eddy says, I feel all of these obstacles put in front of us by Qatar were all known about by the Premier League. I think they would have knocked this back a while ago if that information had mattered. Chris reckons that the 40 million for Joe Linton was all agent fees. Mark Sargent asking about the signage being removed. Again, we don't really know about that, but I'm sure it will be there in glorious Technicolor when the game is televised this afternoon on Taylor says Joe Linton was actually throwing his toys out of the pram to prove a point to Rafa, which was crazy. We have another comment here saying that when Theatre Royal opens, I will see if there's any free rules in Panto for Joe Linton because he's made me laugh this year. Chris says Rafa was gone a year before he left, Mal, just referring to something Malcolm meant earlier on. Jason says there were reports in the Independent Athletic that potential new owners have had numerous meetings to discuss the squad potential targets, last Monday being the recent. Now, I don't believe that would have happened, Malcolm. I've got to be perfectly honest, especially listening to what John has been saying about the potential new owners requesting to speak, to Steve Bruce about players, etc. I find it difficult. I think the two data rooms or the two PR people will probably be talking, but I can't imagine Amanda Staveley picking the phone up to Mike Ashley and talking about anything at this moment in time.
No, I don't think there's any communication. But I would think in all the paperwork that it's very specifically set out as to what can happen and can't happen leading up to the deal being completed.
Yeah, John, it's not likely to happen.
I think probably. No, the thing I saw out of it, Steve, was that I think these meetings were held amongst themselves to thrash out, the day they take over, so they know exactly where they are, who are our transfer targets, who would we want to move out, so that the day they took over the keys, to save time during the summer, they could go straight to Steve Bruce and say, you're in the job in the short term, you're out of the job, whatever. These are our feelings. What are your feelings? I feel that the meetings that have taken place have been amongst themselves, amongst the consortium, where the Rubens have their say, the Saudis have their say, Staveley's little clique have their say, and they get a united front as to how we'll take Newcastle forward quickly. I don't think for one moment that talk has been within St James's Park, either with Ashley. Why would it be? Because he would be gone. Lee Chon would be, because he would be going very shortly. Don't speak to Bruce legally. So I think it's been amongst themselves, so they're crystal clear as to where to go from the very first day, because time's not going to be on their side. When they get the keys, time's not going to be on their side. So they need to be able to act very positively, very quickly.
Yes, Guy Brush Streetwood has pointed out that Joselu has scored 12 goals in the Liga this season. Obviously, someone who wasn't a great fan favourite, but interesting to see that he's been amongst the goals. Colin Wilson says the government say they do not get involved in the Premier League. It's about time, because this will not only be costly for the Premier League itself, but the country will also suffer. A lot of people comparing different strikers. John Barnes is getting a shout out. He got 7 goals in 36 games at Newcastle. So a lot of people saying that there's been strikers who are worse than Joe Linton, but it all seems as if they scored more than Joe Linton has. Joe Linton couldn't score 20 in League One, says Chris. Peter Robson says Joe Linton couldn't score 20 in the Sunday League. There's so much criticism of Joe Linton coming in. I've seen a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people saying, we do talk about the same topics, but unfortunately, because it is, Joe Linton is a big talking point. We spent a lot of money on him, and he hasn't proved to be, the person that we were hoping for. Jason says, great to see Supermac still feeling the passion to talk about scoring goals. Chris says maybe he's upset we call him Joe Linton when his mates back home say that he's Joe L. Linton. Lee Milne says, I can't understand why Bruce continues to take Gale off in every game. Yeah, Malcolm, we've covered this, haven't we, in the past as well. You always get to see somebody who a manager takes off. Rafa's favourite person to take off was Matt Ritchie. Yeah,
he was. I always feel that it's a negative thing to take a proven goal scorer off, and Gale is a proven goal scorer, although I don't think that he's had a great deal of faith put in him over the last 2 or 3 seasons, but nevertheless, a goal scorer, he looks at a game as 90 minutes, and what you're looking for is that one opportunity, that one little mistake, or whatever it is, or that one great pass, and when it arrives, you have to take it. Now, you're not going to score from everyone, but you look at Gale. He scores and then misses one, scores then misses one. That's, for me, that's 1 in 2 chances. That's a great average. And so, but you never know when they're going to come. And if he hasn't had a chance come his way in an hour, don't take him off, because he's sure to get them in the last half an hour. Don't take him off. And I don't think it's. I think one after an hour, it's because somebody doesn't understand what the art of goal scoring is really all about.
Yeah, 100%. Lots of comments coming in.
Good point.
Good point. A lot of people coming in about the signs. There must have been another photo doing the rounds of Sports Direct stuff in skips, so I can only imagine what it's about. Dan Milne says, do you think you owners will get a fan representative on the board? If you were offered it, Steve, would you do it, seeing as though you brought Staveley to the club? I didn't bring Staveley to the club. I met Amanda Staveley on the day she was here. I knew the people who brought her up, and I had a good sit down with her. And yeah, look, I think fan representation is important, but I think it needs to be done properly. Would I accept the opportunity to be a fan's rep? I've already been down that route. I've already done that. I wouldn't revisit that job. I think it's something which would need to be really looked into. I think communication is the biggest thing that the new owners have to get right. They have to make sure that they're communicating with the supporters, whether that's via the media, whether it's via fans groups. But I think they need to concentrate on not alienating anybody and making sure that all supporters are treated as equal. I think my big thing that I've mentioned over the last few weeks on our Friday night show is that there's 52,000 people of which we know on average 3,000 are away supporters. So you're looking at maybe just under 50,000 Newcastle fans who were on the database at the club. I think communicating with those fans first and foremost is important, and getting if you've got their email addresses, then if there's a decision to be made at the club, then it's not hard with technology these days to contact your supporters and ask them what they want. Do you know what I mean? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? So you don't need a fan rep for that. You can get it. You can gauge opinion, and I think interacting using the website, interacting using the TV channel, that would be a massive plus. So I think there's a lot to be talked about when the new owners come in. But I think communication is the key, and they have to get that right with everybody, and bringing in ex-players, people like Malcolm, utilising knowledgeable fans like John. I think that's what the club need to do, and I think moving forward, I think these new owners, PCP, PIF, and the Rubens will do that. That was certainly my understanding from my meetings with Amanda. Anyway, Andy Gibson says he thinks Dyer was spot on about Danny Ings. We should have brought him instead of Joe Linton. Yeah, Kieran Dyer's getting a lot of at the minute. He's been on various TV programs. I haven't agreed with much of what he said, but yeah, I think we missed out on Danny Ings. He was available, he was cheap, and we made a major rick not buying him. Good goal scorer, Malcolm. Danny Ings.
Absolutely. When you think,
excellent player. Sorry, John. Go on.
Yeah, I would say when you think, widening it up from being an obsession with Joe Linton, when you look at what we bought as strikers to score goals, Mutu has been, we almost forget that he's still at the club. And Joselu, whatever he's done scoring against perhaps some of the smaller clubs in Spain or whatever, was not a good buy. I mean, we actually said the one thing that was possibly wrong with Rondon in the past or with Perez is that overall, for whatever clubs are with previously, compared with what we've got now, they score goals. But what about Mutu? What about Carroll's goal scoring record since leaving Newcastle? What about Joe Linton's? What about Joselu? We haven't got a natural goal scorer outside of what Malcolm said, which was Gale, who is a natural goal scorer. There's always been any in the Premier League or not. We know how brilliant he is in the Championship, and perhaps he hasn't been given the best of chances in the Premier League, like playing regularly and not playing on his own when he is not the biggest and most physical of players, but playing off somebody, which is what Malcolm's always talked about with Andy Carroll. Perhaps we'll get one more look this afternoon to see if we can see any improvement on anybody as we go into a summer hanging our hat on some sort of hope. We couldn't finish a more difficult match, of course.
Yeah. Moving on to today's game, Malcolm. Liverpool at home, of course, a team that you managed to stick a hat-trick past, as John mentioned earlier, in your home debut for the club. Obviously got special memories for you, but it's a bit of a dead rubber today's game. Obviously, Newcastle are missing a lot of players. We're missing Lascelles, Lejeune, Clark, Shaw, Isaac Hayden, and Sean Longstaff could return, though, which is a positive. Kraft's doubtful, Bentaleb, Valentino Lazaro and Danny Rose are all available. Obviously, this is their last game of their extended loan agreements. Liverpool are at full strength with the exception of Joel Matip and Jordan Henderson. James Milner's available again. Obviously, came off the bench on Wednesday night against Chelsea. So, one foreboding stat, which I've mentioned in previous shows this week, is Liverpool have won 13 of the 18 away games Premier League this season. So, it's a dead rubber, but I don't imagine Liverpool are going to want to go out on a whimper, Malcolm.
No, I don't think so. They have a tremendous amount of pride in what they've achieved this season, and they want to rub everybody's nose into it, and quite rightly so. Good for them. I think they've been absolutely spectacular the whole of this season, under very difficult circumstances, which it's been for the whole league. But this morning, I was just reflecting back to the very beginning of the season, and you, Steve, asked me the question. I believe it was you. How did I see Newcastle doing this season, and what would be the ultimate outcome? And I said, as long as Newcastle don't get relegated. And so we've criticised Steve Bruce along the way. We've criticised players and what have you. But overall, Newcastle United haven't done a bad job, in all fairness, with what they've got to hand, that they steered themselves clear of relegation a number of games before the end of the season arrived. And so It might not have been pretty, but it's been effective. And so well done to them on that. It would be nice if they could just go out in the last game of the season with a really good performance, few goals under their belt. That would be great. Beat the champions. Yes, it would be super. But Liverpool are very, very special, this side that Klopp has put together. And so I'm not hoping for very much at all this afternoon. But what I am doing is looking back over the season and thinking, well, Newcastle, they haven't done so badly after all.
Yeah, we're going to have a season review next week, I think, with us three. So we'll be able to talk back through that. Give us your prediction, Malcolm, for today.
For today, well, I can't ignore the skills and ability that Liverpool have got, and their freedom of expression that they have, and the goal chances that they create. So I'm going to take Liverpool to win 2-0.
Okay, John, same question to you. Liverpool at home today. How do you see it going?
I think it on Liverpool themselves. Whatever they want, they will get. What will determine, for example, will be team selection. Everybody's available, but what team does Klopp put out? We don't. He could feel a lot of his fringe players with key players like perhaps Salah, who's still got a chance of getting the golden boot, etc., etc. So it depends on his team choice and the attitude of the players. But certainly, I can't see Newcastle United getting anything out of this game. I think it's going to be a Liverpool win. They'll determine through team selection initially and through attitude afterwards what the scoreline will be. But I can only see Liverpool winning this under circumstances.
Yeah, I'm going for a 3-0 win for Liverpool. I can't see Newcastle getting anything out of today's game. I'm very surprised. Few different predictions coming in. B. Taylor's very optimistic. 1-0 win for Newcastle. Carroll to get the winning goal.
I'd really love to see Carroll score today. I really would. He hasn't. He's got close. The nearer the end of the season has come, the closer he's got to scoring. And I feel that it would give him rest through the summer. The little break that players are going to get if he got a goal. It's always very frustrating for a centre forward like Carroll if he's not scoring. Like Carroll wants the next game to come as quickly as possible, and he doesn't want to go into a long layoff before the start of next season, totally scoreless.
Yeah. Funko Freddy says 2-2 draw because the Coppers partied non-stop, like Lee Clark said yesterday. He's also said, would I play Mike Ashley in a film because I like to play villains? I definitely wouldn't. I wouldn't want to have to put all that weight on. I've got to be perfectly honest. Jason says, like I said at the start, I'm just pleased the season's coming to an end. Steve Ingram, very kind of you, says more top class and informative guests. He says these shows are getting a must see for Newcastle fans. Thank you very much, Steve. Jason Carter says 4-2 to Liverpool. I'm feeling optimistic. Barry Taylor says your prediction's spot on. Malcolm, Mark Sargent going to get smashed today. 4 goals for Liverpool and a good sending off for us. And Christopher finishes off. He says Rafa Benitez is the real winner today. Rafa has the last laugh. I'm sure we can talk about that when we do our end of season review next week, and we'll be live again with Malcolm and John. Malcolm will be joining me after the game today with Steve Hasty and Neil Mitchell. We'll be on 6 o'clock straight after the game. Now, John Gibson and Malcolm MacDonald. Thanks very much. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Steve.
Cheers,
and well,
cheers.
I hope you can do better than I.
Fingers crossed.
Okay. Cheers, lads. See you later. Bye-bye.
Okay. Talk later.